What's up, family and friends? This is Kevin Orosz. In this video, I'm going to be having a live discussion, a little live stream podcast with my brother Tariq, who has recently ruffled some feathers in the Facebook metasphere by simply asking questions. This is going to be a fun discussion. Really grateful for this brother who I met a few years ago. We had a short podcast last year, and it's been overdue to have a sequel. If you are watching this video later, just type in replay in the comments and maybe tag someone who gets to hear this conversation, or maybe even share it out if you were impacted by it. And yeah, I think it's really fascinating that in an age where things like fact checkers and information warfare is being disclosed and revealed on every front. And there's so many people out there that don't even realize how much of what they're seeing on these screens through social is heavily filtered, heavily edited, and heavily controlled, unfortunately, by these algorithms. AI is not a new thing. AI has been running these platforms for a long time. And obviously most of it is designed and incentivized just to sell things, which is okay, it's neutral in and of itself. But then it really becomes about, what are, let's say, the effects? What are the unfortunate consequences of groupthink, of scapegoating, and of the awakening of consciousness on this planet via information, via wisdom, via social interfacing, social networking, which, humanity is a social network, and these platforms are an amazing way to actually create more connection if we use them in the right way, if we use them in a way that is net positive for people's hearts and minds and how they actually think about the world. So we're going to get rocking and rolling here. I'm going to get Tariq on camera. Just got to find him here. If you are watching live, just type in the comments where you're tuning in from. Say hi. Type in the chat if you can hear me all right. And maybe share where you are in the world. If y'all haven't seen Tariq, he actually went viral recently because he basically just posted a list of questions asking, why are there no investigations or, clear answers to some very simple but also very earth-shattering questions about the origins of humanity, about ancient sites, about the power of the human mind, also about a lot of things that science and technology kind of take for granted. And the reaction was pretty insane. And so I'm excited to talk to them about this. And we're just going to do a free-form riff here. If you do have questions or comments, type them in the chat and we can talk about it. But I'm excited to dive in with Tariq, who will be joining momentarily. There he is.
Right.
It worked.
Yeah. How are you?
Oh, doing fantastic, brother. Feeling blessed. How you doing today?
Yeah, I'm really good, man. It's good to have a follow-up to our initial chat.
Yeah, I really enjoyed our session last year, and yeah, I'm excited for this one. We got an epic backdrop there.
Oh, yeah. Different things, an axe and a bow, and
that's what I'm talking about. Where are you in the world right now?
Currently south of France.
Okay. Nice.
So just got back from Australia and Bali, and yeah, kind of settling back into a good work rhythm and stuff.
Yeah, I feel you. Yeah, I've been so grateful to just be grounded here in Austin after traveling a lot the past several years. And yeah, learning again the joys of actually being in one place and not constantly being on planes, trains, and buses.
100%.
Yeah, brother. Well, awesome, man. I just want to dive in, just freeform today and just riff. I mean, I do want to ask you about your epic post recently, which I really enjoyed, and the fallout from that, and we can kind of dissect and maybe analyze together and laugh at some of the fallout reaction
Oh
from a
yeah, I'd
simple
be
post
happy
just
to.
asking questions.
I know, man. Who thought that asking questions could aggravate so many people?
It's really fascinating. Have you read 1984? Have you read Orwell?
I have.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that book is so prescient. Like, I wonder if like Orwell himself was like using divination or like he channeled that, because in that book, the party, right, which is this like totalitarian state, they
Yeah.
have a canned response to any question a citizen would ask. That's like
Right.
preset. And beyond that, if a citizen starts asking too many questions that don't fit within the canned responses,
Yeah.
they're considered a dissident and would
Right.
be, thought washed or brainwashed through
Uh,
doublethink and through, interrogation or surveillance. And
the
I
Ministry
think
of
it's just
Truth or
insane
the
that,
Ministry of Love
right,
would then
exactly,
look after them.
exactly. And I think it's so funny because people will read that, intelligent people, intellectuals, people with university educations, holding positions of power in corporations, they'll look at that book and be like, "Oh, this book is so important. You should read this." And then they don't even realize that the
Yeah.
world we're living in, arguably, is even a more subtle implementation of what was described in that book.
More nuanced and more sophisticated in its layering of technocracy and the subtle totalitarian reach. Yeah, no, absolutely. I always find it fascinating that when people talk about world events, I'm like, look, you've watched movies and been able to figure out who the villain is, right? Like
Yeah,
you've watched movies and go, oh, I bet she's the villain. Like everyone's around you's like, nah, she's not the villain. You're like, yeah, but look at this clue and that clue and that clue. And usually you're right? Your deductive reasoning is right. So what I say to people is just apply the exact same logic to life. If you look at life like one big theatrical movie, try and work out who the villains are and what the motives are. You'll get it like that.
it's so crazy. This is part of like, well, so in the Bible, like media, right? I think it's in Aramaic or the Greek, Medea.
Hmm.
Media is the land of sorcerers and glamour and illusion.
Oh, wow. Even I didn't know that one.
And like, I mean, it's spelled differently, but it's the same root word, Medea. And
Right.
also, we know that Hollywood, the
The wood from
Hollywood
the holly
tree,
tree.
is literally what they built wands out of, right? The
Yeah.
witches and warlocks, not the good witches. So it's fascinating to me. Like, you're absolutely right. People watch Star Wars and they're rooting for the rebellion, right? They're rooting for the resistance that wants
Or
to
the Hunger
free.
Games or Divergent
Exactly.
or, yeah. And then it
They're
comes to real
rooting for
life.
the people that are for freedom, that are for integrity and like the reverence for life. And yet in our present reality, what they spend most of their time in, just a glaze over their face
It's
of
crazy,
like,
huh?
what do you mean? Like, when have the people censoring people or stopping people asking questions literally ever been the good guy in any movie they love?
Right. Yeah, for me, it's a fascinating dissonance because it's like the same intellectual sleuthing detective skills that you would need to pull apart a narrative when you watch a movie or read a book is exactly the same that you would apply to life. But somehow people think, well, we say like life imitates art and art imitates life. So if that is the case, then you should be able to look at the theatricality of what's on the world stage and be able to deduce, just use deductive reasoning alone and be able to work out what's what. But somehow people think that it only applies in the world of the television and not in the world that is all around them. And through my own experience, the world around you is a giant screen, is a giant stage, and you can absolutely apply the same rules. I mean, if you watch Mission Impossible, I can't remember which one exactly it was, or even like some of the Bond movies, like who are the villains? Usually the billionaire philanthropist types who are building some new technology, and it's always for the good of the planet, and it's always for everyone's benefit. And yet what starts to reveal itself through the narrative of the movie is actually they hold very different values. They might see themselves as the hero in their own story, but to everybody else, they're the villain. And so for me, these archetypal battles of good and evil, dark and light, are what I see because I've always I've always written and loved stories. I've always seen and understood the world through a narrative lens. Watching movies, I always watch movies and see the character arcs and see the hero's journey. So you just apply the same thing to life, and I promise you, you'll be able to see the wood from the trees in no time.
Yeah, we share that. I saw you were writing a sci-fi novel. I'm writing a fantasy novel right now.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, the hero's journey, that lens, like the archetypal, rise from the ashes and the facing of trials and the archetypal battle between good and evil. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
those stories came from this reality. It's not that people just made up a completely false thing that doesn't imitate life.
Right.
It's 100% a one-to-one correlation. Now, there are fascinating like psychological ideas of how this could be. How could someone go to the theater at Star Wars, root for the rebellion facing the Sith, like forces of technocratic evil and control, and then go into their life and clock in a cubicle, literally working for a Sith Lord? And
not
it's
only
insane.
that, but also actively try and take down the rebellion.
Right, right.
So
I mean,
it's like actively trying and like grassing up or daubing, depending on where you are in the world, the Jedi. Be like, hey, there's a Jedi there. You might want to come and catch them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is kind of like the Agent Smith effect, right, from the Matrix. So
1000%.
anytime an uncomfortable moment arises or a narrative is challenged,
yeah,
that someone perceives as safe, they can morph into an agent of the Matrix and actually police that node of reality by being like, no, like chemtrails is a perfect example, which I think was one of your posts. I'm shocked. It's like, this idea of there are NPCs out there, like we're in a simulation and there's NPCs, just like a video
non-player
game.
characters.
Yeah. Without fail, someone will be like, they'll post a picture of like crazy cloud formations and they'll be like, what the hell is this? Like, this is crazy. Like, look at this. This is like chemtrails. Like, obviously something's being sprayed. And without fail, hundreds of comments will appear of like a Wikipedia copy and pasted answer from like Karen and Rachel, like, like 50s, just like housewives somewhere.
Yeah.
And they're like, what do you mean? These are vapor trails excreted by airplanes that the altitude freezes the smoke. And like, you're just like that person has no stake in this game, but the canned response, that Agent Smith little like reaction is like automatic. It's like they don't even know that they're doing it. They like have to do it. They're like compulsed to do it in some weird way. I find it fascinating. And this happened on
100%.
post, right? You literally just posted a series of questions about unsolved mysteries or like interesting discrepancies in human history. And I was reading through the comments, like when it first came out, like it's like a week or two ago, right? And I was just laughing my ass off. Some of these people that are willing to die on that hill,
right,
trying to debunk, fact check, or use logical fallacy. Like a lot of them are using ad hominem. They're like, oh, like hippie, like they're like attacking you personally. They're not even addressing what you brought up, which to me is immediately a sign that they know in their gut, in their heart, that something is off and something's happening, and the discomfort compels them to act in that way.
And I have a lot of compassion for that, because for me, it's like people have gone through their whole life. Oh, are you hearing an echo or not?
I'm not. I was hearing a little earlier, but it feels good now.
Okay.
We can do headphones.
I'll do my best to ignore the echo. But I have a lot of compassion for those people, because they've gone through their whole life believing the world to be a certain way. And so to rip off that lens and put a new one on, or to dismantle all of your beliefs that you've held since childhood, it's like a unraveling that you tug at a cord, and then all of a sudden the whole ball of yarn starts coming undone. It's a very difficult thing to come face to face with, because you all of a sudden have to question religion, you have to question education, you have to question the school system, you have to question almost everything that you've grown up with, the foods that you believe are good for you, the foods that you think are harmful, the clothes that you put on your skin, the aerosols you spray under your armpits, the cosmetics you use on your face, the toothpaste you use on your teeth, the water that comes out of your tap. I mean, where does it end? So I have a lot of compassion, because it's a very confronting reality to think to yourself, maybe everything I've been told ever since I was born has largely been a fabrication. And the people that I trust to tell me the news are actually the ones who are furthering that fabrication.
Yeah, I forget who said it. oh, there's Noam Chomsky, someone, it's like it's harder to convince someone that they've been duped than to actually trick them. Because if you've
Yeah.
already pre-bought into the ideas that have been sold to you and like and ingrained them, not just like
Mhm.
accepted them, but actually reinforced them, it's so uncomfortable to be confronted with evidence that that's not the case. And so of course people would default to just like, no, like they're blue pilling. They're just like, okay, like that can't be true, because if that's, please don't tell me that's true. Because if that's
Yeah.
true, that means, oh no, like it implies something about them. You know, it's very personal. Compassion's the only like sane way to relate to that.
Yeah. I love the quote. It is no measure of wellness to adjust to a fundamentally sick
Yeah,
society.
Krishnamurti.
Yeah.
That's a quote for our time. People that are well adjusted to Babylon and the Matrix, this is not something to be proud of. This is a trauma response.
Yeah.
What did you find with like after the fallout of that post? Because I've seen you riding the momentum. I saw you with Nassim, which is amazing. Like,
Yeah.
have you found that you're getting like hate mail and like DMs, or did you actually encounter people that were changing their mind and actually wanting to enter into a dialogue with you?
Well, for me, okay, this is, it's fun to be able to have this discussion, because usually you write a post and there's no backstory of how you wrote the post or where it came from or anything. So I wrote those questions not because they're questions that I have in my mind. I wrote those questions because I think they're questions that other people should ask. So I've already been finding answers that ring true for me over the years to what these questions posit. I put this to send other people down their own treasure hunt, down their own breadcrumb trail. So I had a lot of people write to me and say, you must have the IQ of mayonnaise, and what an idiot, and go back to school, and Google can answer this so easily. I love those answers
Yeah.
the most. Everybody answers life's most pervasive questions through Google. And actually, I got so much like aggressive ad hominem attacks that the first day and a half or so, it did affect me. And I remember I was speaking to my partner and she was like, why don't you just block them and delete them? And I was like, I can, but there's part of me that just wants to sit in it, that wants people to just throw those arrows at me and just take it, because that's the cost of holding original thought these days. Like holding original thought and being able to be a stand for what you believe in is to lead from the front, is to take arrows. And I believe that you have to be able to be that example. Otherwise, what chance does everybody else have? If everybody's too scared to say what they think, or even think about what they want to say, because they have to fit in and conform to this like mass hysteria, then of course it's going to be difficult to have freedom of speech or maintain freedom of thought. So I'm like, okay, the first thing I did was I checked on some of these profiles. I was like, who are these people that are attacking me so viciously? Maybe they're learned scholars with backgrounds and PhDs and diplomas. And I just see like people who don't look like they're going anywhere in life, who have no original thought or videos or anything on their own profile. So they're not personalities, they're not personal brands in a way that they're carrying their message and their mission on their sleeve. And so I was like, why would I let people like that affect me? If anything, it seems like my wall is giving them their 15 minutes of fame. And it's not, I'm not saying that in a pompous way. It's not like you need to go through life and have followers, but usually if you do have followers or some kind of platform or following, it's because you're expressing your original thought and your ideas, and people are aligning with your message and your values. So if you are hiding behind obscurity, and the only time you come out of the woodwork is to chastise and criticize someone who has original thought, that's not worth getting upset over. So I was like, have at it. Let the trolls run wild, right? And ultimately, to me, it's like trolls live under a bridge, and online trolls live under people's comments.
Yeah.
But I realized during the pandemic how many people were scared to speak their mind because of what other people around them might say. And I was like, how can I be an example if I'm scared that a few people will be offended or triggered or upset. And the funny thing is, some people were like, why are you making these claims? I said, there's no claims being made. I'm simply asking questions. And so that's a fascinating thing to me.
Super fascinating. The troll metaphor just really holds up.
Yeah.
I love the work of Rene Girard. He's an amazing theorist all about scapegoating. And he has a bunch of works on this. And like the basic thesis, which is played out every day on social media on your post is a prime example, is this idea of scapegoating, which is an ancient tribal practice that is unconscious often of dealing with emotional tension and offloading the hatred, the resentment, the frustration of not having their own needs met in whatever way. It could be sexual tension, it could be violent tension, it could be creative tension. Like actually some of these people, what they yearn for more than anything is to actually be in your position or in a position where someone's listening to their original thought and value. But the scapegoating effect is basically the mob will form total mob mentality in the comments. Twitter, you see this maybe the most insane. Facebook obviously has it as well. The mob must project all of these unfelt feelings onto the scapegoat. I mean, this is the story of Christ. This is the story of all messiahs and prophets. This is the story of not even like good prophets, but like, false prophets and tyrants. They are scapegoated by the mob in an emotional ritual that's as old as humanity to offload this energy. And obviously that can turn into like killing or crucifying the person in ancient times. Today, though, in the current culture and woke culture and the woke mob, their scapegoating is reputation destruction. So they're attempting to undermine and project an image of someone who's devalued in the current thought arena. And this is extremely fascinating because often it backfires. Like in your case, I mean, this happened to me years ago when I went viral about speaking about masculinity. It actually ended up emboldening me and increasing my reach and calling the silent majority, because the minority of these trolls, this is a very small percentage. The vast majority of people will silently look at that post. They may not even like it. They may not even like, touch a button on their phone, but something's happening. And they're actually supporting it in the opposite of the scapegoat effect, which is, holy shit, like someone just stood up and took a stand and they're inspired. They're activated by that. There's a transference of courage that happens. So I salute, men like you and many of the people I know that are speaking out in these times. COVID to me was an intelligence test. Are you intelligent enough in the true sense of the word, capital I intelligence, which is not like your IQ. It's your human knowingness. It's the sum of your intuition, your emotional aptitude, and your spirit, your soul. Are you intelligent enough to see the ruse? Are you just going to step in line and raise your hand and be like, oh yeah, I agree with the current thing. It's like that meme of the NPC. It's like, oh, I agree with the current thing, because that's how you avoid being scapegoated, which is a deep fear in humanity. If you were ostracized or scapegoated in ancient times, it meant death. Because we were hunter-gatherers.
Out of the tribe, you wouldn't have the same options, the same access to food, nothing, shelter.
Exactly.
Totally get that. Hey, listen, I'm going to try and exit my video and come back in, because I've been hearing both of us echo, and it's been really difficult to try and focus on what you're saying.
If we have headphones, that should go away. I'll pop in headphones.
It wasn't that. I plugged in my phone to charge it, and that's when it started. Okay. So I'm just going to exit out and just invite me in again, and I'll come right back in.
Gotcha. So everybody, thanks for being here. Obviously, this is a very timely discussion for our times that we live in. And I'm curious for anyone who's listening in right now, do you have any questions or any comments on what we've shared so far? And if you're just hanging out and you just want to just chill with us and listen, maybe you're on a walk or you're having your lunch, wherever you are in the world, just type in the comments where you are in the world, just one word of where you're in. See if I can bring Tariq back in here. Because this is really fascinating. This actually, there we go. Still got an echo?
No echo now. Perfect.
Awesome. Okay. Facebook in 2023 with Meta's billion-dollar balance sheet, they still can't figure out basic stuff on Facebook live stream. I don't think I've ever done a Facebook Live like this where something didn't go wonky.
Really? And the thing is, I've actually been really looking forward to speaking with you. And I've also been watching your own journey and how you've really stood in that masculine role of being a polarity coach and guiding other people through authentic relating and everything. And so I wanted to have this conversation with you properly, not plagued by strange audio, video issues. But to touch on something that we spoke of before, like my wish is not to be a martyr or a sacrificial lamb. And unfortunately, and I say this to everybody who's listening and everybody who may listen in the future, if you don't stand up for what you believe in and share your own original thought, even share it as speculation, share it as opinion, share it as your own values, if you don't do that, and very few people do, they will become the martyr. They will be sacrificed on the altar of everybody else's apathy and indifference. And I think it is important to stand up for what we believe in. And the more of us do that, the more of us can do it together, it becomes a formidable force rather than one lonely person standing up like a tall poppy just getting cut by shears. It's so much better when we can all stand up for what we believe in. We don't have to do it in an antagonistic or like, I don't come from any confrontational side. I'm not even taking sides at all. I'm just saying, hey, like, let's find the unity in this. We live in one giant realm that is made up and comprised of so many different ideologies and beliefs. If we all held the same beliefs, all dressed the same, ate the same, looked the same, walked the same, talked the same, how boring an existence would it be? So I welcome different views and opinions, but we need to be able to have the capacity and the emotional tolerance for other people's views and opinions without seeing it as an attack on us. How other people feel about the world is how they feel about the world, and they are entitled to that. Don't try and take it away from them, because then you rip the rug out from the very fact that you yourself want to be honored in your beliefs. How can you be honored in your beliefs and your way of thinking and your way of seeing the world if you don't extend other people the same courtesy?
Yeah, this is a brilliant way to look at it. I mean, the way I literally look at things, you know, Elon Musk, say what you will about him, I think he's kind of a gray hat. I think he's doing some good. He's probably also,
Right.
He's in some
Dancing
clubs
with the
that
devil.
probably aren't great. But on his recent Joe Rogan, he talks about this, and I think he correctly understands it, that a lot of this energy we're talking about is a mind virus. You could look at it as a mimetic pathogen. Terence McKenna, one of the late great, talked about it as ideology. So what's happening and what you're describing, the way I look at it, is people are possessed by ideology. So they've been given an ideology. Perfect example, the allopathic medicine model. So the medical model, right? Pertinent for everyone for COVID. If you believe that model and take it in like a virus, you become the ideology. You actually identify with it. So when someone challenges it, even in a subtle, indirect way, it's as if they were challenging you as a person. Which is why you see the emotional reaction, why you see the vicious attack. The absurdity of that, and this is where you have to have the insight and compassion of the Shambhala warrior, or the one who can face that in the world, not take it on, not take it personally, and just see that person through the ideological mask that they actually think is their face.
Yeah.
They think it's them.
That's a good way of putting it.
This is one of the most dangerous forces unleashed on the world right now.
I remember when.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I remember during the pandemic when people were like, I can't believe that everybody's walking around wearing masks. I was like, how can you not believe it? It's a physical representation of what's been happening emotionally for decades. People have been walking around shrouded in mask upon mask upon mask. You think people are themselves? When someone says, oh, how are you? And someone goes, oh, I'm fine. They're not really fine. They're not telling you about their debt or their divorce or their depression or their challenges and angst and anxiety. They want to present this veneer of, I've got it all together. I'm fully composed, so that you'll look up to them and have respect for them. So we've been walking around shrouded in masks. So for me, people walking around physically covering their faces was just a symbolic gesture to the aforementioned. And it also marched hand in hand with the curtailing of freedom of speech. So it was symbolic because all of a sudden everybody has their faces covered. And to me, it's an outpicturing of what's happening internally, right? It's like as within, so without, as above, so below. We're just watching the outpicturing, the rendering at a collective level of the inbuilt shadows and traumas and hurts and wounds that we've been carrying for far too long.
Yeah, this is a beautiful way to look at it. And it's, again, it comes back to compassion. If someone is muzzling themselves and their thinking and their speech and also their physical body, what you can see through the mask is someone who's afraid.
Right.
Which is something we can all relate to, is like feeling afraid, feeling uncertain, wanting to fit in, again, avoiding that sense of being exiled or ostracized, because that means death. Even if it doesn't mean physical death, you know, you can still find food and, you know, live in our very abundant world right now. You're not going to actually physically die, but reputationally, emotionally, it feels like death. So people will defend that under any circumstances. And for you, Tariq, like what did you find, like what did you learn about yourself, like making a post like that and having it, you know, have a big impact and kind of broke the algorithm? Most people really I know, myself included, like whether they're shadow banning or like there's algorithmic, like most people I actually care about that are like close to me can't even see my posts here or on Instagram and other places. And seemingly that post broke through that veil.
It did, man. You know, a really crazy thing, right, is my community size. Let's say for me, following just sounds so, I don't like it because I feel like we're all on the journey together. I don't feel like I'm surrounded by followers. I feel like I'm attracting other leaders. So for me, the whole term of follower doesn't ring true anyway. But let's say the size of my audience or community was growing by about 200 people a day because I wrote several posts during the last few years that got shared far and wide. I mean, they sprung up on all kinds of influencer pages on Instagram, and I saw them on like multiple other platforms. And I was just writing because I was like, this needs to have a voice. Somebody needs to be saying this, and saying this in this way, using satire, using humor, using analogy to pick apart the logic. And my following was growing by 200 people a day. And then all of a sudden I get this message from the platform saying, oh, your account's growing big now. We need to install some new security measures. And all of a sudden, crickets. It would not grow at all for months and months and months until this post somehow broke through. And in the space of 3 or 4 days, I went from having just under 12,000 people following on Facebook, which is where it last capped at, to now having over 20,000 people. So even though it drew some trolls, it also drew 8,000 aligned souls. So for me, it's like, I'm happy to take those arrows and have those trolls have their minute of spotlight in order to attract 8,000 new people into what I feel is my digital extension to my real world tribe. Because a lot of the people that I've met on social media, and that's what happens when you're being authentically yourself, is like I said that, oh, we're passing through Australia. Several people were just like, hey, come stay at our place. We have a farm here. We have a room here for you. We have a house here for you. And it's just doors opened. And I was like, wow, what an amazing return on kindness. What an amazing return on authenticity. This is not social media, it's soulful media. It is a platform to connect with real people. And if we can make the effort to have more meaningful discussions, deeper connections, rather than just pictures of our food or nights out or some flexing of status, then we're going to elevate the game and evolve it together. And this platform and all other platforms become how we use them. So if we use them for meaningful connection, they become platforms for meaningful connection.
100%. It's just a tool. It's completely neutral, even with the rules of engagement being controlled, which it very much is. If anyone's under the illusion still that like you just need to post more because your reach isn't out there, like there's tons of documents and like revealing now that prove that these companies have an agenda on who sees what and compartmentalizing information. My theory on that post Now, first off, it was authentic and like thought provoking, but also I don't know if you've seen The Social Dilemma. Um,
Part of it.
yeah,
I never fully watched it.
yeah, it's got its own agenda in it. You got to take it with a grain of salt, but I think that's a very fascinating, sign of the times. And forget the guy's name that runs it. He's all about the ethical AI and ethical social media foundation or whatever. Um, but basically, the long short of it is that the algorithm prioritizes polarity in the negative sense. It prioritizes controversy
Mm,
because this is what keeps users on the app, which means they see more ads, which
right.
is how Meta gets paid. Meta is an advertising company. They don't get paid for content. They get paid through advertising.
Yeah.
So they're beholden to their shareholders to maximize time on app. And what they've done by studying, I imagine since 2020, is that type of content is what does that the most. So
Mm,
in their view, that post was serving their goals, which is why it got flooded and probably got uncapped in terms of reach. This is a beautiful way for those of us like you and myself who have messages and want to share, powerful truths, using satire, using humor, being a little cheeky, is we can actually hack the algorithm. Like you
yeah.
said, it's a completely neutral tool. And anyone out there that like wants to share their message, wants to create live videos, write posts, share their work if they own a small business, etc. It's good to understand how the game is being played right now, because you can
Yeah.
actually use the beast, so to speak, against itself, which is a great optimistic viewpoint of social media or soulful media.
Yeah. Also, I mean, over the last 2 years, I've never been blocked or banned or put in a timeout or whatever the term is. And I think it's because I'm very aware of how I'm writing. Now, I mean, I don't want to speak too soon, right? Who knows? But the thing is also, I'm not attached to this. Like, if I were to lose this platform tomorrow, it would be sad because of all the connections that I have to other people. But I would probably just go like, oh, it's about time anyway. Like there's days where I literally want to take my phone and smash it against the wall and just like walk out into a forest with a book and a notepad and just like disappear for a month. You know what I mean? So I'm not attached to this like digitization of value. Instead, I see this as a way to reach other people and a kind of meritocracy where if you write something that is on the cultural zeitgeist, if you happen to tap into what people are thinking and feeling, the response will indicate that and will show you that you are tapping into a collective thought, a collective emotion right now. And so for me, it's a great way of opening up further discussions. And that's how I've used it. And honestly, a lot of people think social media is a waste of time. Well, it's a waste of time if you use social media just to scroll and look at other people's stuff. But if you share your original thought, if you start to build an authentic brand, and by a brand I mean just put yourself out there in a way that's true to you and who you are and what you're doing, and also your products and services, because ultimately those are the ways that you serve other people. Those are the ways that you support other people from your gifts. So you helping couples and singles find and rekindle polarity within their relationships and rediscover what it means to hold a masculine essence or a feminine essence and be able to bring that so that there's this yin yang dance. Like, that's a much needed service in a world of homogenization, right? Everything is just kind of like this blended androgyny, and then you lose the polarity, which is ultimately what attraction is in the first place. So that is a service that you're giving the world. How else do you know that you'd be able to reach the world if not social media and these platforms that are using us as essentially cogs in an advertising engine, but we get to use it to be the platform that allows us to be a megaphone or a mouthpiece for our own mission and message.
Yeah, I'm 100% with you. I definitely have days where I also want to smash my phone or like delete everything and
Yeah.
disappear into the forest and just be a philosopher and just enjoy life. And it's always good to take periods of like no social media, no technology. I try to do at least 1 or 2 days a week like
Yeah.
that. And it's
Yeah.
super important for mental health. I would
Vital.
recommend that to anyone. But it is fascinating, the history of the internet. The internet was developed by the military
Right.
in the 80s and 90s as a communication network in the event of nuclear war. So it was a military tool.
Yeah.
Now then the marketers got a hold of it. So the dot-com boom, and they're like, wait a minute, we can sell people shit on here, and let's sell all this stuff. And it was never meant to be released to the public to be used in beautiful, connective, inspiring ways. That was a secondary effect, which
Yeah.
has now
I
been the
wonder,
double-edged sword of it, which is the beauty of technology. Is it's a tool, it's a mirror, it's completely neutral.
but I wonder how true that is, right? Because on the one hand, I feel like that's a convenient story to tell everybody that, oh, the internet wasn't actually meant for you. You got it by accident. It was
Right.
actually meant to be this military communication network. But on the other hand, I feel like social media in many ways, right? It takes the, if you if you were that way inclined, it takes the sport out of surveillance. It's so easy to find where somebody is, who they hang out with, what they do. So I actually think that we have essentially created a society that wants to document our own stories, which is what we do when we build personal brands, right? It's like this double-edged sword. And yet we are basically participating in our own surveillance. We're like, no, you don't need to survey me. I'll do it for you. Heck, I'll even tag all of my friends in it. I'll show you where we are, show you what food we eat, where we hang out, what time of day it was, how much I walked and where I walked, right? We're doing all of the surveillance. Oh, I have my little wristband that tells you my heart rate variability and where my thoughts are at and what my mood is like. We are flooding the system with biometric data and information about our habits and our whereabouts and where we hang out and what we do. So that it was released to the public accidentally, I don't know. I think that was the long-term play, and I think that the official narrative is that, oh, we accidentally released this to the public. Oh, well, I guess we can't take it back now. But I think it's actually, it's part of the surveillance. And the thing is, when I use these tools or these platforms, I do it knowingly. I know that that's one side of it.
Yeah.
But the other hand is, like, things are quickening out there. The world is a very fast-paced, rapidly changing ecosphere. And if we're afraid of standing up or standing out or sharing our message or being seen or being known, if everybody just disappears into obscurity and hides in their rooms and just does what they're told, like, I think that a lot of people are going to go down a very, very slippery and very scary slope. And so I think it's important not to come, again, from a place of, because you see all these movies, right? It's like fight for this and fight for that. I don't necessarily know that fighting is the answer. I think fighting is part of the problem. I think we need to stop seeing red corner, blue corner, and instead look at who controls the ring.
Yeah.
Who set up the fight in the first place? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So instead of saying like this side or that side, it's like, well, who profits from the suffering of both sides? And look there. And that way we can unify rather than further divide. And so I really use this as a platform to unify messages and to find other people who are aligned with that unification. So I know, and I can spot and identify future collaborators, future business partners, future whatever.
Yeah, no, I'm 100% with you. And I also doubt the narrative. I think you're right on one level. I think there is like an element of chaos to it. Like, anyone who tries to assume control and roll out like a diabolical plan like that, because of the way the universe works, which I believe is synchronicity and a divine order. Like there's just a serious order to life. So many little secondary effects that weren't accounted for are happening, like what you're talking about. This is actually, social media is like meeting you. I would have never met you or known about you unless this platform existed. It's actually serving to connect up the rebellion or the light. Not that we're having to fight against, but the value system and the networks that have formed as a secondary effect are the beautiful silver lining to that. The thing about the surveillance thing is like, yeah, like we are doing the work for them in a sense. The real question is like, what is the data that the surveillance is giving? So imagine an AI is studying this conversation, for example. It's like, oh, like Kevin and Tariq are talking. Like, what are they talking about? What are their values? Let's analyze
what are
it.
These humans up to?
Yeah. And the AI is like, oh, wow, they value benevolence and abundance and the human spirit, and they seek to connect and make people, less afraid, not more. It's like, we're training this machine as it's training us. It's a dialogue. It's not a one-way thing.
Yeah.
So the more people do what you just said, stand up, speak the truth. Their family members, their high school friends might show up in their comments, the trolls under the bridge.
Yeah.
But then they meet 3 other people that are like completely aligned with them, that are near their area or whatever, that they never met. So the sum, like it's a positive sum game. The sum total of the good
Absolutely.
that's happening far outweighs the scary stuff.
Yeah.
And anyone who's like, I don't want to use social because of XYZ, like, do you know what they're doing and blah, blah, blah. It's like, what's the alternative? Are you gonna
Give me an
gonna
alternative.
disappear in the woods with a loincloth and like try to affect mass change? It's not gonna happen.
Also, you know, something I got shown was, okay, let's say, for example, the regulations and rules get really strict and tight over here. You can leave that place and go somewhere where things are more lax. And then the encroachment might find you there as well. And then you have to leave and go somewhere else. And it's like, you can only run and hide for so long. At some point, you have to start placing your energy much more intentionally into the systems and structures that you want to prosper, and withdrawing your energy and consent from systems that are ultimately self-service or parasitic in nature. We want to move towards a collaboration with each other that goes beyond economy, right? So everybody's talking about the economy, the economy. Do you know what, like, when you look at the word economy, it means essentially a system or structure that is defined by having producers and products and consumers. And I think that's such reductive language. To reduce you as a multifaceted, multidimensional, divine human being to just a consumer is such a slap in the face. So when we stop talking about each other as consumers or producers and instead go from an economy to an ecology, and an ecology is the relationship between people and one another and people and their environment. And ultimately, we are ecological beings, not economical beings.
Yeah.
But we've been hoodwinked into speaking this economical vernacular, this language, human resources, right, instead of human assets. And I think it's important that we first reclaim the language, because that's where the spell casting first starts. It's in the language. And so we are actually living in an ecology, and we need to move away from a parasitic ecology where you have like a mosquito sucking blood or a leech sucking blood from something else at its detriment, to its detriment, and instead move towards regenerative practices, which is how nature is, right? Yeah. The fruit falls from the tree, the animal transports the fruit, new seeds fall in the ground, a new tree grows, more fruits grow, more animals get fed. It's regenerative. And so I think when we start to move towards structures that are regenerative in nature rather than parasitic, so not what's in it for me, but what's in it for we, not ego, but we go. And how can we create systems that benefit each other? And we stop looking beyond our myopic lens of me and my human experience, and instead look at what's happening in the world. Look at what's happening in the Middle East right now. And people want to like take sides, and I'm like, I'm on the side where people don't die. I'm on the side where children get to live. Like, is that a side? Is that one of the options that you can present me with? So we need to have these conversations, because if you can't even talk about it, how can you change it?
Exactly. I mean, this is one of the methods of control. It's like, if you can control speech, you can control thought, because speech is manifested thought. And that's really the scary part about censorship and restricting people's voices or fact checking and debunking people, is what you're doing is you're eliminating a possibility to have these kinds of discussions, which in an ecology are essential to transmit information and nutrients. Like, thoughts and ideas are nutrients. Like, your information diet matters. And a lot
Cellular
of people
nutrition.
that are doom scrolling are eating junk food. Other people are creating and shining lights that actually will vivify and nutrify people. And so that's what I really respect about you and what I've seen from your work. Now, to jump into another discussion is like the only thing I've seen that can do what you're talking about is blockchain technology. You know, I don't think
Yeah,
it's necessarily like the answer to everything, but because of the way it's set up with transparency, with privacy, being decentralized, being a network mode that's very different than this, that's the only technology that I've seen that I'm excited
mm,
about. That when it fully reaches maturity and we have something like a decentralized, censorship free blockchain social media environment, for example,
right.
that's when we'll really see the momentum extremely pop off. Like I always had this like thought experiment, like what if tomorrow the algorithm turned off all its biases? Like back in the day, like when Facebook Live first came out, I was
Yeah,
living in LA. I was teaching yoga. I just started coaching. This is like 7, 8 years ago or whatever. And I remember you could go live with a small following, and I would have hundreds of people, a few
right.
times thousands of people jumping into a live that I'd never met because the algorithm was, it was still controlled, but it was less. Imagine if they turned it off tomorrow and you posted a post like you did, or we did this video, and it had the ability to reach anyone, anyone.
Yeah,
Like there was no like rules or like compartmentalization. Like just imagine that world, how fast ideas and benevolent systems could be created at scale
yeah.
if that
Well,
happened. And that's really what we need. We need to take off the brakes. Now,
yeah,
obviously, it's never worked in human history where, you know, we the people have asked tyrants or people that seek control, like plutocrats or technocrats, we're like, hey, can you please just give us the thing? It's never happened. So that means
right.
we have to create it and stand for it. And like you said, the best way to do that is to withdraw your energy from parasitism, invest your energy in symbiosis.
1000%, man. I agree with everything that you said. And, you know, for anybody who's watching who may have had questions, but you've been on the fence, like in the last few years or with a pandemic, or learn to spot the patterns of manipulation, because you'll find that, I mean, verbatim, like textbook, if you were to replace the word clinical narcissist or coercion tactics with the institutions and authorities, you'll see that they're using coercion, like textbook coercion, or textbook the way that a clinical narcissist would manipulate you into thinking that it's all your problem and gaslighting you along the way. That's exactly what was done. So like learn to spot the patterns so that they don't happen again. Because when I see people go like, oh yeah, but it's only for 2 weeks, or oh, they're just trying this new central bank digital currency, they're just testing it. It's like, you don't get it. Once they set it as a precedent, it's much easier to just extend it and extend it and extend it. And you think you're getting the dystopia trial package, before you know it, you signed up for a 2-year subscription. So I think it's important to spot these things early on and withdraw your consent and withdraw your involvement, because otherwise, once you've had a trial of this stuff, it's harder to roll back. And what I've noticed is, even since the pandemic, there's always some calamity, catastrophe to focus on. Have you
Yep.
noticed that? There's always like, okay, now the next thing. Now let's all talk about the climate. Now let's all talk about um, trans issues. Now let's all talk about the Middle East. And now, and they're very valid, because these things are happening, but it's also a siphoning of your energy. It's a siphoning of your emotional, like prana energy, and it's divesting you of the creative life force you need for your projects and the things that will actually further humanity. And it's acting like a black hole that's pulling you down, showing you all of these shocking images. And it's important to know what's going on up to a point. I think seeing images and thinking that that's you helping, it's not. If you're seeing images and then you do something about it, like you see an animal in like bears, for example, in captivity, and you decide to then donate to the bears, fantastic. Now you're actually part of the solution. But I love the quote that you can't change the news, but the news can change you.
Yep.
So if you're just watching passively, just as some kind of consumption of fear and consumption of anger and consumption of hatred, that's only going to serve to propagate and perpetuate more anger and more hatred. You have to actively start standing for and positioning yourself in the arena of the solution. Otherwise, you perpetuate the problem.
Yeah, I mean, people don't even realize how fast things could change if people just withdrew their consent. This is the real black magic of a lot of the stuff you're describing, is by not taking a stand and taking personal responsibility, the consent is automatically given. It's passively given.
Right.
And this is how this stuff is allowed. Like, you look at the world and you're like, how could some of this stuff even be happening? Because every person you talk to, like your neighbors and the people at the grocery store, everyone, even people that aren't aware, so to speak, they know something's off. They're like, this isn't right. This isn't, but like no one's doing anything. So the passive consent is feeding that thing.
Tacit
agreement. That's really the fun part, is like, all you have to do is stand up, take your attention away from the thing and direct it somewhere else, and it instantly changes. You don't need to fight the thing, which actually feeds it. That's the trap. Like the I Ching says, when you fight evil, you sharpen its teeth.
Ooh, who says that?
It's in the I Ching.
Oh, that's beautiful.
So it's like, when you battle a force that feeds on confrontation, you strengthen it.
And I think that's why we see such a prevalence in all movies. I'm like, wow, there's so many movies about the resistance and the rebellion, and from Star Wars to Hunger Games to Divergent to Equals to The Gift to, I mean, I've watched all the sci-fi movies because I grew up loving them until the world started to resemble the movies. And I was like, hang on, what's happening here? These movies, they're teaching you to fight because you are outgunned and outarmed. Like a lot of these, like the military forces, they would love for you to fight. Just give them an excuse to unload the tanks and the bazookas and all kinds of fun stuff that they would be like a carnival of delights for them. Instead of fighting, we need to unite instead of fight. So instead of fighting against something, as you said, like from the I Ching, I didn't know that it said that. What a beautiful quote. When you fight against evil, you sharpen its teeth. We're not supposed to fight. We're supposed to stand united, because when we stand united, there's no fight amongst each other. When the people stop fighting amongst each other, then we are united together, and then we have a vast majority outnumbering any kind of institutions of control. But it requires people to calmly, peacefully stand together.
Yeah, and it requires one of the scariest things for most people. Like, there's all these memes now where it's like, yo, you're the main character in your story. Like, it's time for your main character era. You need to start doing some main character shit. A lot of people right. don't have personal responsibility, and they're afraid to seize it, even though it's their birthright, even though it's their nature, because that requires accepting consequences, that requires facing trials and resistance. And it requires
being a background extra.
Yeah. And it requires owning your actions. We're like, yeah, you can make a mistake, but that doesn't mean you failed. It doesn't mean you go back to being a sheeple. You gain so much confidence and self-love and respect, and you find the others. This is why standing up and just holding the line, even when the arrows come, guess what? The allies are coming too. It's like classic Lord of the Rings. Like, you know, I feel like you and I probably we could go on like a huge podcast about our favorite like fiction and mythology. It's like Helm's Deep. You know, they're facing this like orc army in Two Towers, and like the elves roll up. It's like, whoa, like we're standing for something. Here, the allies appear. That's how everything in your life works. Relationships, starting a business, making art. You face trials. People will tell you can't do it, and then automatically, because of natural law, the allies appear. Yeah. And this is what a lot of people, it's a leap of faith. You have to leap to receive the feather bed and the net of safety and synchronicity. If you stay there and you're like, well, I can't do it because I'm afraid or no one will support me. That's right, they won't, because you're not visible. You need to be visible and step into the light.
Reminds me of that scene in Divergent where I can't remember what her name is, but she's joining Dauntless, and they bring her up to this roof, and there's this just dark pit, and they say like, you have to jump, and she doesn't know what she's jumping into, but she just trusts and has faith, and she lands in that net, and they're like, welcome to Dauntless, you've made it. And so in the same way, like if I didn't stand up and ask questions, and whether you think they're stupid questions or not, you know, some of those questions I wrote, like even if they are stupid questions, I'm writing questions like that to show you that even if you're asking stupid questions, it's worth asking, because even though someone might find it stupid, it might spark a conversation. It might inspire some dialogue, some new trains of thought. And it's worth it, because I think too many people accept the answers they've been given rather than asking what they might deem to be stupid questions. And there's a big difference between having academic brilliance or smarts or having intelligence. I've seen a lot of academically brilliant people do some really dumb shit over the last few years. In fact, some of the brightest people have made the dumbest decisions because they're only looking at things through an academic filter or through a prefrontal cortex analytical brain pathway, instead of looking at things more narratively and correlatively and going, wait a minute, this doesn't check out. No, I remember reading that article here, and now here's that person who was the CEO there. Now they've started this company, but this company is involved in this kind of technology. What's that about? Like, that ability to connect dots, even though these days it's like labeled as, oh, you're a conspiracy theorist. It's like the highest, most prized detectives, both in the FBI, in stories like Sherlock Holmes. Like, we prize people for their ability to use their deductive reasoning and their ability to see and map large images rather than focusing on one puzzle piece. And we herald those people and laud them as detectives. We laud them as sleuths. And yet when people do it, we like to slap on a label and go, oh, conspiracy theorist. And it's like, not everything is a conspiracy, of course. And there are some far-flung theories out there. But to say that there's no conspiracy either, and that everything that you see is perfectly normal, and you can explain it all away with whatever the common science is and no common sense is of the era, I think is to do yourself and others a horrendous disservice.
Yeah, this is some of the magic of Hollywood. Like, this is the theme in this discussion of, like, when we see it on the screen in this augmented reality where we're like, oh, I'm going to project myself as the hero or the resistance. And look, yeah, this person's using deductive reasoning, calling out bullshit. This person's resisting tyranny. This person's standing up for integrity and responsibility. But then that's a scapegoat mechanism where it's done there, but it can't be done in this reality.
Right.
And actually, in fact, you become the villain in this reality when someone else tries to do that thing. And that's right. A master stroke of deception. I mean, you got to give it to someone if they're like a chess master. That is a master stroke of deception that I can respect the game on that level of, like, whatever evil or service to self. Yeah. And at the same time, it's absurd. It's also comedic that we would be living in a reality where the very people who are pointing out things that a child, like children are a perfect example. Children, if you give them bullshit information, because they're pure of cultural programming to an extent as they start to age, they'll immediately be like, you know, mommy, daddy, this is stupid. Like, this doesn't make sense. Yeah. And the parents are like, oh, well, this is just how it is. Boom, the conditioning goes in. The children know. And those of us that, you know, it's like Christ, like, you must become as a child to enter the kingdom of heaven. Part of the childlike, not childish, but childlike understanding is what you're talking about. It's a zoomed out, intuitive, organic intelligence, capital I. It's not PhDs in the New York Times. It's actually looking at reality as it is, piecing things together and asking questions. And I think there are no stupid questions. You could ask a question that in a Harvard business class is like, well, that's stupid because we know. It's like, but is it stupid? Even if the question could be logically or deductively debunked in a sane way, it's still not stupid because you're perceiving and curious about the world, which is a virtue. That's actually a virtue in the real sense.
I remember that very first question. It's like, why is there an Egyptian pyramid on the US dollar bill? And someone was, many people actually were like, oh, that's so easy. Like, Google says it's a sign of strength and solidarity. And I'm like, so just because Google says it's a sign of strength and solidarity and it's called the whatever seal, does that make that the true answer? Do you think that legal tender that is being used as one of the chief modes of enslavement and ensnarement on this planet, that it has a symbol of hierarchy with an all-seeing eye at the top, and then Latin, right? And they say that it doesn't mean announcing the birth of or the conception of the new world order. It actually means something else. And it's like, don't just look at the answers that you read, but filter it through your own awareness, right? Like kinesiology works because your body knows what's true. If I said my name is Tariq and somebody tries to push my arm down, my arm is going to hold strong. But if I said my name is Rachel and I'm a 12-year-old girl and somebody tries to push my arm, like even now I can feel my arm weaken. Your body knows what's true. You have brain intelligence, but you also have heart intelligence. You have neurons in your heart, and your heart often informs your brain. Your heart is formed before your brain is ever a thing. And then you have gut intelligence with all of your gut flora. You have innate intelligence. When people say, I feel it in my gut, it's because it's their gut that's giving them the answer. And somehow we've become disembodied. We've gone up out of our somatic experience of intelligence into our analytical and actually very subservient and inferior form of intelligence, which is just rational thought. Not even rational, but just thinking things through our minds. And it's like the key decisions that you make in life, you do based on how it feels, like who you want to be with, who you choose to marry, whether or not you want to launch this business or that business. You don't weigh up everything on a spreadsheet. You tune inwards and you go, yeah, they're the right person for me, or I want to be with them, or I'm in love, or I'm not in love. Like you make those choices based on an innate knowing, right? Do you turn up to that meeting? Do you book that plane ticket? All of these choices are made innately. And so don't outsource that. Don't outsource your innate intelligence, because even after speaking to Nassim Haramein, what he said is like, you are not a finite intelligence. You are entangled with the entire quantum field. And people like Albert Einstein, the reason that they were such geniuses is not because they were so smart. It's because they were tapping into and were like the difference between like a 56K modem and broadband, right? They just had a broadband connection to the morphogenetic field and to the intelligence that's around us at all times. So the more of that you can access, the more intelligent you become, because you have infinite access to everything. But first, you have to clear all of the programming and conditioning.
Yeah, I love this. This is the true wisdom, is like being a vessel for wisdom, not creating it from an ego personality.
Right.
All the great thinkers. It's funny how all the physicists like Einstein became mystics at the end of their life.
Yeah.
They went purely into rational, logical materialism, and they came out into, I mean, what is Bell's non-locality theorem? Quantum entanglement. All protons in the universe are connected. And this is demonstrable through mathematics. It's not like a woo-woo idea. And that's a beautiful example of like, well, this is like what a lot of me and my friends here in Austin, where we, you know, these discussions, like you would fit right in here. Like we like talk about this shit all the time. The core root of a lot of the suffering that we're speaking on here is materialism. Materialism is the dogma and religion, or scientism, you could call it, that's causing the suffering. Because if only the visible material world exists, and if only, you know, science, which is not science, the actual scientific method is not being practiced in universities and laboratories.
Right.
It's
Because
very
scientific
much
method is inquiry and questioning.
Exactly. That's the core of it. Asking questions and hypotheses is the actual scientific method. What's sold to us is prepackaged. Like you said, it's the tyranny, you know, control, free trial period. It's like, well, you sign up, it's free for now, but you'll be paying for years.
Yeah.
That is the core, is that if you believe materialism, which is a very nihilistic viewpoint, is that we're just, you know, pond scum that grew a brain and everything's just, it's just meaning we just made up through our own, you know, experience of the world, and everything's linear, like pool billiards hitting each other. This is a very defeatist and very inferior worldview.
Yeah.
And that
it's also great for controlling a population.
Yeah. That's why a lot of people feel spiritually
all
disconnected.
Random.
They feel
it's all
sad
random
because
no
their body knows, like you said, their heart knows there is an emergent, like ephemeral and highly connected reality of the ecology of life. All life is connected, all matter is connected. And yet the materialism sold defies that. And so that sets you up for that, like it's Neo. It's like, what is the matrix? I feel off. You know, Morpheus says, You felt something your entire life and you
Yeah.
can't describe it, but you know it's there.
But it's
That
there,
movie
like
is a
a
fucking
splinter
documentary.
in your mind.
It's literally the best.
That
People watch
movie,
The Matrix and they leave the theater and they're just like, that was a cool movie. It's like,
I remember when I first saw The Matrix and I walked out of the cinema and I was like, I was forever changed. There was like before watching The Matrix and after watching The Matrix. After watching The Matrix, I was like, oh my gosh, we're in a matrix. How did I not see it before? And I think that was the red pill. Ironically, the movie was the red pill. And they tried to unred pill everybody with the fourth Matrix and say, oh, it all took place inside a video game and it was all meaningless all along, by the way. And even the Wachowskis tried to come out and say, like, no, that's not what we meant by red pill. It was actually a commentary on gender. And it's like, this was 1999. That's not what it was about. Everybody knows that. And it wouldn't have become such a cultural meme if it didn't hold so much credence, right? So to red pill is to wake up from the illusion. And for a lot of people, it's much easier to live the dream because it's much easier to believe that everybody who is adopting this parental figure of a state and government institutions and everything all want the best for you. And yeah, you know, they might have their pitfalls. We're only human, but ultimately they're good people and everybody wants what's best for you. And I think there are a lot of fabulous people who hold very high degrees of office, but that doesn't mean that there aren't larger agendas at play that don't wish you the best. And you only have to look at what's been happening in the world to be able to see that. And actually, you know, Kevin, we can talk so much about the problems and the challenges, though I kind of feel like by this point in time, since we've all lived through the last few years, everybody's aware of what the challenges and problems are. And if they're not by now, they probably never will be, because you could show them. I remember like when people say like, oh, like show me some facts. I'm like, they're all around you. Just look at what's happening in the world. Look at the health of the people that you care about. Look at what they're being pushed into. Does that seem healthy to you? Does that seem like the kind of world you want to live in? Can you not see that something is off? If you can't, that's fine. But then I'm going to focus on the people who can. So I made this choice after like, I don't know, 2 years of writing posts and making videos. I was like, that's it. I'm now going to focus on solutions. I'm going to have analog solutions to help people and digital solutions to help people. Because I also, like you, feel blockchain, Web3, decentralization can actually be a very, very powerful asset for people, but it has to be benevolently steered, right? It can't yet be just another arm of a technocratic control structure. And so ultimately, I think we infuse that with our consciousness and with our intent. And then there's also analog structures and systems. So I feel like by having a solution within the matrix and a solution outside of the matrix, then that's something now that I can empower other people with. And so I'm focusing much more on the solutions now.
100%. I mean, I do feel part of my dharma is to help inform and speak to these things, and like a problem correctly identified and encapsulated and enunciated is half solved. So
Right.
there is power in pointing, but you're absolutely right. I totally agree. If you haven't gotten it by now, if you lived through 2020 to now and you're not, you don't have your little exclamation mark up and you're like, huh, you may never get it. And that's okay. Like we could still have compassion for people we know, maybe family members, loved ones. But those of us that are seeing the more beautiful world our hearts know is possible, as our brother Charles Eisenstein describes, you got to get on team solution. And the way to do that is to invest your money, your time, your attention, your care, your art and creativity in the solutionary models. I believe blockchain in terms of just tech is the most powerful. In terms of social cultural, I believe it's the return of the village. Why? Like in Bali is a perfect example. The Banjar in Bali. You know, I lived in Bali for many years. I love that island. You see this also in Latin America, Costa Rica, Mexico. The village being separated through the myth of Western idealistic individualism and materialism has broken the bonds of the village. We evolved in the Dunbar's number model of like 150 to 300-ish humans, depending on who you ask.
Yeah.
That's the social, cultural, on the ground piece that must be reformed alongside the decentralized blockchain. Like the village is in the IRL, the in real life blockchain, of decentralizing into powerful communities and allyships with councils, with men and women re-entering divine union in their organic polarity templates, with re-naturalizing into health and wellness based on nature, not based on, you know, medical models.
Right.
This is what we're going to start seeing. Everyone you talk to, I'm sure you've seen this with the people, you know, as you travel the world, as you post, everyone I know that's building wealth right now has this same vision. We want to start a community. We want to live on the land. We want to start trusts and actually reclaim our lawful citizenship. You know, there's the whole lawful versus legal thing too.
Oh,
Everyone
yeah,
I know has the same dream. They all know in their heart that that's what we're moving towards. It must happen. Well, it's nature's intelligence.
It's like what we spoke about before, right? Your ideas are not your own. Your ideas are not your own. Your intelligence isn't your own either. So it's like ideas and concepts are like low-hanging fruit. And I feel like when your consciousness is sufficiently receptive to those ideas, that's when they fall from the tree into your head and you're like, oh, I just had an idea. And so what we're experiencing is hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people are having the same fruits drop in their heads at the same time, going like village, community, lawful trusts, independent of the system, outside the 9-to-5 matrix, full reclamation of our own health, so we're not dependent on pills and potions. And I mean, I love Western medicine, though I feel there's an over-reliance on it. So
it's
if I was
great
to
if
cut
you break your arm, but it's not going to heal your emotional traumas.
Exactly. If I cut my shin open, like I want somebody to stitch me up, not sing me a mantra. However, for people to turn to pills for every little headache, every little stomach upset, it's like that's your body's intelligence communicating with you that something is up worth looking at. Your headache might be dehydration. It might be too much blue screen from your devices. It might be you're too close to an EMF source. It might be that you haven't had enough sleep or good quality sleep. Those things can then be addressed and you no longer need the suppressant, because I think we suppress symptoms rather than treating the source. And so Western medicine absolutely has its place, though first and foremost, what can you adjust in your lifestyle and your habits and your diet, in the way that you think and move through the world, that is going to support you to be in a state of wellness. Because I think I think we have largely a sick care system, not a healthcare system.
Yeah, I mean, medicine and health is one of the front lines. I also think food is a front line, food and water. That's a place a lot of people start their awakening, including myself. I got into biohacking and like fasting and organic food and all the things. And that was a substrate that accelerated mental, spiritual evolution, because the body is primary. I do think that's a way a lot of people will be reached who are skeptical of all the other things. They might think a lot of things we've discussed here, it's like, you have your tinfoil hat on. But the health dimension, you can't argue with, because it's self-evident. It's in your body. It's how you feel. Now, the monetary element, I think, is another big one, because we're in, you know, Kali Yuga, or whatever you want to call it. Actually, I've heard a lot of people say that we're actually in the traditional Yuga system in Dwapara Yuga, which is after Kali Yuga. So it's like Kali Yuga is the Iron Age, or the Age of Darkness, and we're moving back into the Bronze Age. So that's why things are accelerating, and like technology and social systems are changing rapidly. Obviously, it's going to get worse before it gets better, I think, on some level. But as we transition into the accelerating up again, we are headed towards a world that works for everyone. You don't have to make it a utopia, golden age kind of ideology like a lot of the new age does. But make no mistake, money must change. Food and medicine must change. Social structures must change to receive the evolution that's coming for humanity. Nothing can stop it. The forces that try to control it will objectively fail. Even though they might win battles, they will lose the war, because it's natural law. That's why I'm an eternal optimist.
Yeah.
I don't believe that the sum total of human history, all the tears cried, all the stories written, all the love given, all of the beautiful things that have happened up until this point from our thousands of ancestors backing us, it doesn't end in like a Hunger Games type scenario. It ends with human beings saying, I've had enough. I'm going to create something different.
And those dinosaurs, you know, it's very much the dinosaur, right? The reptile brain, seeking control, seeking to collude and conspire. They'll die, they'll go extinct. And they know it, which is why they're fighting so hard. One of the most beautiful memes is like, if the world was really so fucked up and hopeless to change for the better, the propaganda wouldn't be necessary.
Yeah. And, you know, when it comes to asking questions, I'll hit you with a couple of others. The world is overpopulated.
Oh yeah.
Is
Great
it?
one.
I mean, have you flown anywhere? Like every flight I've ever taken in my whole life, and I've done a lot of traveling, almost everything I see out the airplane window is empty land.
Yeah.
There's very tiny pockets of humanity. Now, obviously, like you have places like India or certain parts of mainland China where people are a lot more densely packed together or corralled, but there's a whole earth. So you're kind of being sold this idea that there's no space for you. And so people are huddling in cities, seeing the congestion in the city and taking that as a reflection of the macro, and it's not. So that's one thing. The other thing is like that we're running out of water. We're living on a water planet. Like the planet is mostly water. I was speaking to a sailor the other day who's lived on the water her whole life. And she said to me, the idea that we're running out of water is the most ludicrous thing, because any sailor will tell you that we turn salinated water into clean drinking water every day. And there's a whole ocean. There's oceans and seas. There's so much water. And then you speak to someone like Nassim Haramein, and he says, like, we're not losing energy because energy, right? First law of thermodynamics, energy cannot be created or destroyed. So therefore, you can't lose energy because energy just gets transformed or changed in its form. So all of these ideas, like we have to really unpack all of these ideas. Are we losing energy? Do we not have water? Do we not have enough space? And then who would profit the most from believing that those things are true? And who would gain the most by dismantling those ideological structures?
Yeah, I mean, carbon dioxide's another one. Plants literally eat carbon and eat carbon dioxide.
Right.
There's many people that are so afraid that like we're heading towards like the sixth mass extinction and everything's about to die. Meanwhile, like, I mean, these climate scientists are suppressed. You can do your own research. Don't take anything we're saying for granted. There's never been more carbon dioxide, which is feeding all plant life on Earth at peak levels that haven't been seen since like before the last ice age, basically. So a lot of these ideas like overpopulation, climate change, obviously the climate changes and there's cyclical nature to the climate on Earth. I mean, one of my favorite bits, like sometimes the only way to like handle this stuff to like bypass people's defenses and that Agent Smith is humor. Like the late, great George Carlin, he has a great bit where he's like ranting about climate change. He's like, climate change? He's like, the Earth has been through super volcanoes and massive earthquakes and floods and ice ages. Yeah, ice ages and smoke and fog covering the whole planet, and like a couple plastic bags and aluminum cans, and the Earth's like, oh, we're fucked. It's over. It's like the idea, not to say that there isn't obviously a lot of cleanup and more regenerative practices. Of course, we can do way better with the environment, supporting all beings, animals, and plants. But
taxing people who don't have money, I don't necessarily think is the answer.
Yeah.
If the people in control, or the people who think they're in control, really cared about the climate, number one, they wouldn't fly around in private jets everywhere eating Wagyu beef while telling everybody they should eat crickets. And number two, they would be planting trees. Like planting trees should be an absolute imperative of everyone, because trees give oxygen. I mean, it's the most obvious thing, right? And this whole idea that it's all random and it's all happened this way and evolved this way. I'm like, how is it that trees perfectly breathe in what we breathe out and breathe out what we breathe in? Like, what a coincidence. I mean, so there's all of these things that when you really start to look at it, and, you know, some people would be like, oh, are you a flat earther? Are you a this? Are you that? I'm like, it doesn't really matter. And if you really want to know the truth of it, you haven't been to space. So you can't categorically say, you've only seen images online, heard things that people have said, and you're interpreting mathematics that exists. Until you have yourself been to space, you won't be able to 100% unequivocally know the truth. But here's the thing, it doesn't matter. Either way, we're still on it. We still need to breathe. We still bleed. We still seek belonging. We still need food and shelter. All of those things are true, regardless to what shape of the planet we're on is. So I think people get lost in the labels. And instead, we just need to see, hey, guys, there's like more important discussions to be had here. And something that I've really been on a pathway with lately is water. I feel the true importance of water is one of the best guarded secrets of today. And if you look at the work of Veda Austin, if you look at the work of late Masaru Emoto, and there's also people from like the 1980s, Jacques Benaviste, who published a paper in Nature, and then they tried to discredit him a few years later. Water is the medium that holds consciousness. Everything that is alive has water in it. When a woman is fertile, we say she's fertile. Why? Because she has waters in her womb. She's able to hold a child. When she can't have a child, we say she's barren. In the same way that we say land is either fertile because it has a water source, or it's barren. When we say things like cash flow, right? All of our language connected to wealth is connected to water. Cash flow, income stream,
Liquidity.
making it rain, open the floodgates. Oh, our business is just pouring in. Oh, it's drying up. Or we say an investment pool, or we say a liquidate, or the liquidity of an asset.
Yep.
It's like, it's all water. And so what I kind of like my inquiry and exploration with this is that water is the medium that actually holds consciousness. Because the first thing that happens when a body dies is it starts to lose moisture immediately. The first thing, like, you just start losing all your water, because the water doesn't have to inhabit your body and house your consciousness anymore. And so why am I saying this, and what's the point of this, and how does this fit into our discussion? We say that we are what we eat, but you are not 70% food. And you are 70% water, right? So therefore, it's much truer to say you are what you drink. And if you are 70% water, and animals, if you eat meat, are 70% water, vegetables and fruits, if you eat vegetables and fruits, are 70% water. You live on a planet that's at least 70% water. So you're a water being living on a water planet that eats water-based food. You are a body of water. When you were a baby, you were born out of your mother's water, and you were 99% water, right? So there's all kinds of things that are showing that water is a much more important conversation than we've been having. Now, if you are what you drink, what have most people been drinking? Chlorinated, fluoridated, pharmaceutical residue filled, hormone residue, heavy metal laden, calcified, dead tap water. So if you are 70% water, then most people are 70% tap water. And why that's important is, what if we were to change that water with a much higher quality water, structured water? You can hold more information because the hexagonal molecules form in different ways. And I actually think, this is my hypothesis, right? I'm not a scientist or anything, but this is just what I've been noticing and what I am speculating to be the case. The very, very low quality of the water that most people consider drinking water is one of the primary ways that consciousness on this planet is being suppressed.
I mean, I 100% agree. I would challenge anyone who's like confronted by that to go look at images which are widely available of the tap water pipes and what's inside them when you open them up. The residue that's in your body and in your brain and in your blood.
Yeah.
I mean, water is a liquid crystal. It's a memory card. It's a life-giving, I'm reminded of Dune. Like, if you've read Dune or seen those movies, the Fremen and on the planet, the desert planet Dune, Arrakis, it's all about the living water and the sacred water, the water of life.
Yeah.
You know, this is, I mean, you're on the money. Like, water, the idea that there's not enough fresh water in the world, or the idea that we can't desalinate the ocean water, or that we've run out of springs is an absurd notion.
Yeah.
And again, ask yourself who benefits and who's selling the water and who's putting
Right.
things in the water and why. What are the stated reasons for it?
Yeah. So I think water is an increasingly important discussion to have. And I think we are what we drink and we are how we breathe. There's a lot of like emergent studies showing that mouth breathing is causing all kinds of deformities in people's faces. It's actually leading to more cases of ADD and ADHD and autoimmune and like all kinds of stuff from the way that people are breathing. We're shallow breathing here and we're not fully breathing into our full capacity of our lungs and using our diaphragms. And so it's almost like we have to remember the most basic things today, right? We're relearning everything like toddlers. We're like, what is a man? What is a woman? How do I breathe? What water do I drink? How can I eat? How do I sleep? Have you noticed how our conversations, the most advanced minds in the world, are solving the most basic things? Like, how do we breathe? How do we sleep? How do we eat? And that's where we're at. We're relearning everything. And in order to relearn everything, we have to unlearn everything that we thought was the way.
Yeah, it's a beautiful, like, full circle that we have to nail the basics. Like, if you want to build the pyramid, we should probably build the foundation first,
Right.
which is food, air, water in our bodies on the most simple layer. And then from there, we can build unimaginable beauty and systems that work for everyone. I would challenge anyone who's like watching this now or later, like do your own research and actually come to your own conclusion. This is the value, the whole theme of this discussion, and why
Right.
I've loved having is like ask the questions for yourself, because only your answer will matter. Our answer or some expert's answer doesn't matter to your life because you have to answer it.
And you know, some people would say, and this is part of the ego demolition journey that I've been on, because once upon a time I felt like I was really arrogant and I was masking a lot of inner insecurity, and I had to be right, or I had to have my beliefs proven right. And these days, actually, some of the stuff I believe in the world, if it were true, is really dark and really upsetting and really sad. And I would love to be wrong. I genuinely would love to be wrong. So this idea that we're attached to our beliefs, like if you think back one generation, right, our parents, our grandparents, they typically held the same set of beliefs from birth to death. Now, I feel like people can change their beliefs. Some people change their beliefs like houses. Other people change their beliefs like socks. I'm in the latter category. I hold no beliefs hostage. They are all free to go. If you can show me information, evidence that rings true in my somatic experience, like I'm not just going to take some spreadsheet and go, oh yeah, that must be true because some lobbied scientist said so. It has to ring true. It has to make sense. If it does, I'm happy to admit I was wrong. I would love to be wrong on so many things. Now ask yourself, if you're watching this, do you love to be wrong? Are you willing to accept being wrong? Because I've had a lot of people who, even in the face of new information presented to them, would rather find something to debunk what they know to be true just so that they can say they were right. And they're paying such a heavy price for this. People are believing that it's normal to get sick twice a year or 3 times a year. Coughs and colds, like you don't have to have those at all, right? I think those are the body trying to release toxins that you're flooding your system with on a day-to-day basis. Of course, it's going to show up in a cough or a cold or a upset stomach. Like, I think it's amazing that human beings live as long as they do, considering how much we fuck with our nature. It's like an absolute assault on what it is to be human, even down to the very basic definitions of binary biological states that have been so since time immemorial until like 5 seconds ago. And yet that's where we're at.
And that's how we move forward, is like admitting and realizing where we are in the GPS system. You are here. Where do we want to go? And having conversations like this, you know, like unveiling what we really feel and believe, and letting each man, woman, and child, each beautiful being, come to their sovereign self-responsible, radically owned conclusion. And that's the
Yeah.
kind of world I want to live in. That's the kind of community I want to be surrounded by. Those are the kind of people I want to invest in and partner with.
Yeah.
And everyone else that wants to throw slings and arrows, you know, love you too, but I'm going to keep you over there. And when you're
Right.
ready to join the fold, we'll be ready to accept you with open arms and a big hug.
Yeah.
I think it's a good stopping point, brother. I do got to get going here. We could go for like 3 hours. I look forward to potentially having more discussions with you. And before we go, Tariq, so grateful for you.
Man,
Is there any
next time
last
we have a
message or
discussion will
anything
be,
you want to share before we
yeah,
bounce?
I was going to say, next time we have a discussion, why not have it be in Austin and come and see you in person?
That'd be awesome.
That would be really cool. And take this from being soulful media or digital into the real world. Anything that I want to say is, like, I don't share this stuff because I need to or because I'm trying to get a kick out of triggering people. It's because I've walked such an unconscious path myself. And I used to be, and this, I think this is a good place to leave it, just so you know, like, where I'm coming into this from. I was somebody who was born with, you know, parents who worked their whole lives. I went through the whole school system, got my degree, got my master's, got a really good job afterwards. I got into alcohol. I was drinking multiple times a week. I was having a lot of unconscious connections. I was microwaving frozen chicken breasts in the, you know, in the microwave. I was eating McDonald's at 4 a.m. after a night out. I was spraying heavy metal filled deodorants on my armpits. I was using toxic gels. I was using fluoride toothpaste. I mean, you name it, I was doing it. And it's only through a deep journey of discovery that I was like, wait a minute, almost everything I'm putting in contact with my skin or in my body is harming me. What would happen if I stopped doing that? And I went on this deep healing path and discovered plant medicines and started to cultivate inner stillness so that I could actually sit and contemplate life and cut out all of these toxic foods and toxic ways of being, and murdered my ego multiple times over so that I could have the humility and humbleness to say I was wrong. Please show me a better way, to be teachable, to be coachable, to find teachers and mentors and say, I'm ready to learn. I say all of this just because I feel like we don't have that much time in the world. And I mean this with love. If you don't awaken onto a path that serves you benevolently and others within the next 6 to 12 months, I think you're not going to be around. You're simply not, because you're going to end up making choices that lead to your own demise. And so let this be your permission slip to ask questions. I'll take a few arrows in order for you to feel like you can even step up and do what you want to do. We need to awaken as humanity. We need to get back in touch with our nature as nature and stop living in direct contravention with the very things we need to be well. Stop looking at people who are morbidly obese or who look like they're on death's door for your health advice. Stop looking to these large corporate interests that benefit and profit from your illness to take advice on how to live. I mean, basic stuff, guys, basic stuff. That's really my message, is like, please, there's a big difference between being woke and being awake. And I'm not saying that we are awake, but we are definitely on a path of awakening. Put yourself on a path of awakening, because I think the time to wake up from that is shortening. It's like, wake up now or live in a coma or worse. And so that's really my message. And it's a deep message. It's a serious one. Now is the time. And if not you, then who? If not now, then when?
That's it, brother. Amazing sign off there. Really grateful for you and this conversation, which is incredible. It's going to be available here for the folks asking for a replay. I'll also probably upload it on YouTube. But if you've been impacted by this conversation, you're watching live right now or later, please do tag someone that you're like, yo, check this out, share it out.
Yeah.
Give this man a follow. Obviously, check out his posts, especially that recent one we spoke of. And yeah, brother, I'd love to do like a live podcast or even like a panel discussion with you at some point.
Yeah, that'd be
Maybe
fun.
we can do another one here in the coming months. But yeah, I'd love to see you in Austin, and super grateful for you, man. Kindred spirit.
Absolutely, man.
Keep fighting the good fight, brother. But don't
Thank
fight.
you.
Unite. Let's go.
Yeah, keep uniting the good unite.
Peace, my man.